We will start presentation. So please go ahead, Caroline. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for everyone for joining this product launch. As Lars said, I know it's a little bit different from all being together, but I really hope that we provide you enough information on this exciting new launch. And if not, please ask us questions in the chat as we go along. We'll be monitoring the chat and we can ask the questions afterwards, or just ask us in person after the presentation. We'll unmute you all. So what is Overtake? Overtake is our new turf selective herbicide, launched first in Sweden. So you are the lucky ones to get this product first. And then we will be launching in the rest of the Nordics, hopefully in April, in springtime this year. And then other countries in EAMI will follow shortly after that. So you guys in the Nordics are first, which is great. So it's really exciting to be able to do this presentation for you guys first. What is Overtake? Overtake is a dual active product. It contains, now, sorry for my pronunciation, I always get my tongue tied over these, fluroxypyr and fluazolam. Now we like to refer to them as flu-flo because it's a little bit easier on the tongue to say flu-flo. But the two active ingredients are fluroxypyr and fluazolam. Now the dual action not only gives makes our product robust and reliable, but also it's broad spectrum. So we'll go through all these aspects throughout the presentation, but these three key benefits you can see on the screen. Broad spectrum comes from the double AI in Overtake. And it also means that it's reliable to use when weather conditions might be warm or cold. The dual action, the activity in the product makes it reliable to use. And we'll go through some of those points throughout the presentation. And also through the trials that we've done, and we'll talk in more detail as well, you can save time using Overtake in terms of the water volume you can use Overtake with. Might surprise you the results that we saw, and actually you can save time in getting around the course. So getting you ahead. So not only getting you ahead in terms of getting your weeds before they take hold on the golf course, but also getting around quicker and getting ahead of any players that might be out early morning that like to get in your way. So getting ahead of them. Here we go. So get ahead with Overtake. Our new herbicide, we like to support everything we launch with robust science. So although you might have heard of these two active ingredients before, they're new for Syngenta. So we like to make our own trials and our own research to make sure that we're giving you the most robust information and accurate information that we possibly can. So as you can see there, we've done over 70 trials throughout in 9 countries, which is a lot of trials, but to make sure that we've covered all types of weather conditions and other situations. That's what we've done. And we're committed to ongoing research. So when we get to Marcella's results at the end, we have the trials research so far, but then Marcella will talk a little bit about ongoing research and development we're doing to try and, further enhance this product and be able to possibly put it with other products to enhance any efficacy. We are proud at Syngenta to always offer our best practice advice and our sort of local knowledge and local advice from a local advisor. So I know that Lars will always be on hand, and our distributor partners in Nordics will always be on hand to provide that best advice. And we pride ourselves in Syngenta on giving that for you. Most importantly, we want Overtake to be another tool for you in your toolbox for maintaining high turf quality. So the herbicide, as I said, is a new launch for us in the Army, and we want to add it in as a tool to complement all of the other products and services that we provide in Syngenta and give you a more robust solution. So with Overtake, we don't want you to have to worry about your weeds. In the springtime, there is so much more that you need to be thinking about. So whether it's what fertilizer program are you going to use? Are you going to use a plant growth regulator, for example, or what water program will you use? There's so many other things to think about, and we don't want weeds to be one of them. We want it be a given for you that Overtake means you don't have to worry about your weeds. So solving a problem for you. We know that with Overtake, we can save you precious time and resources in terms of time to get around the course, but also the resources that it might take in order to fix any weed issues that you might have. So maybe you will have to overseed if the weeds get established and you're leaving bare patches of turf, for example. You might need to do some overseeding and use other resources that if you use Overtake in the spring, you can avoid using that precious time and resource when you've got so many other things to worry about. We know that Overtake is safe for turf, and I've got some specifics on this later in the presentation. So you don't have to worry about your turf when you are spraying for weeds, because I know it can be worrying. You know, you're essentially with a herbicide, you're killing plants, but we want to, you to be sure that it isn't going to affect your turf. And the two active ingredients combined, they do provide broad spectrum control and also reliable control in the springtime. For example, now in the UK, we're having quite warm weather. So it got up to 16 degrees yesterday where I live. But the week before, it got down to -2. So the two ingredients in Overtake mean that with these fluctuating temperatures, you can still be sure that you'll get reliable control. And we are always thinking about your turf and want to put your turf first. So we know that there is competition in terms of your time and resources, as I mentioned in the previous slide, but also for your turf's resources. So we want to ensure that anything that you're putting in to your turf, any resources, fertilizers, any other inputs that you put into your turf, they want to go directly into your turf and not into feeding any weeds. So making your turf robust and not feeding your weeds. And this will make your turf more competitive. So I know that there can be issues with snow cover in parts of Sweden where you get snow cover all winter and you're not really quite sure what you will see at the end of winter. Will your turf be okay? Will it not be okay? You know, it's a really difficult time. So with everything that you have to think about, we want to make sure that your turf is as competitive as it can be. And we found out that weeds are actually the third most important factor for players when thinking about the condition of golf courses. So I'll just go on to the next slide. We ran some market research, some player market research. So asking players what were the most important factors for them when they were looking at a golf course, choosing a golf course to play on, and for any sort of satisfaction factors. And free of weeds, you can see there in the long list of sort of things on the left there, you can see that free of weeds was the third most important factor. Only in front of the ball sits proud and the grass is even and consistent. So actually, when we're thinking about player satisfaction and I guess your club manager's satisfaction, then it's really, really important that your turf is free of weeds, and it can make you more competitive as a golf club. But then not only did we want to think about the players, we also wanted to think about you guys and what was important for you. So after the last seminar, which was on application with Tom Robinson, you might remember, or you might have received a survey which was asking about some different questions on herbicide application, on Primo Max, and on fungicide application. Now, we focused here specifically on herbicide application, and I just wanted you to keep this graph in mind as well as we go through the presentation. But we found out that 400 litres a hectare was what 80% of you guys were spraying herbicides at, and only 20% at 200 litres a hectare. So when you consider this, when we go through the presentation, we would actually recommend going at a lower water rate for Overtake at 200 litres a hectare, in which case we could save you guys potentially 80% of you some time when applying Overtake. So we'll come back to this graph at the throughout the presentation. I'll refer back to it, but just wanted to highlight that we really want to listen to what your customers want, but also what is important for you guys. Okay, so what actually is Overtake? So this is where I get into the technical bit. So as I've mentioned, Overtake has two active ingredients, flu, fluroxypyr, and flow, flurazolam. And you can see the concentrations there. What's interesting is the mode of action. So flu very simply disrupts hormone production. So flu specifically is an auxin, so the hormone auxin inhibitor, which affects the production of auxin. So essentially it mimics the auxin, so it's a synthetic auxin, which stimulates the role of the natural auxin in broadleaf weeds. So it replaces the natural auxin at binding sites. Auxin is a key hormone which regulates virtually every aspect of the plant development and growth. So by effectively overdosing the weeds with this synthetic auxin, Overtake disrupts and destabilizes plant development and plant growth, and it will cause abnormal growth patterns in the broadleaf weeds and rapid overgrowth. And this rapid overgrowth is just not sustainable for the weed, and the weed eventually overproduces and it will suffer as a consequence. Flu accumulates at higher concentrations than natural auxins and is broken down much more slowly, and therefore it dramatically causes a dramatically higher activation of plant cell auxin. And I've heard the term auxin overdose used. So it basically overdoses the plant with the hormone, leading to its sort of curling up and in the end, dying of the broadleaf weed. Now, flow is an ALS inhibitor. ALS is a key enzyme in the synthesis of amino acids and proteins, which are really, really important in the growth. So from a young plant growing into an older plant, it's key in those growth stages. Amino acids and proteins are the building blocks of any life. So any inhibition of this will cause the weed not to be able to grow properly. And And this is why when you apply Overtake at a stage when the weeds are not yet fully established and still growing, it's the most important time for them to be providing these amino acids for growth. And so inhibiting this will ensure that the weeds aren't growing properly. And another important or interesting part of Overtake is the actual formulation. So it's a suspo emulsion formulation, which we don't have too many of within Syngenta. But it basically means that there is a solid and a liquid. The flu and the flow have different, one's a solid and one's a liquid, basically. And so we have to get them both into a formulation that works to the best efficacy. So the suspo emulsion formulation allows us to get that solid and the liquid in suspension, designed to disperse in water. And it's the ideal combination, the ideal formulation to combine those two active ingredients for the best efficacy and to maximize performance. So a lot of work goes into formulation with Syngenta, and this is the very best formulation for this product. Okay, so getting ahead of your weeds is very important. So for Nordics, the label is 1 application in the springtime. So that will mean that there will be the presence of weeds, but they might not be fully mature. So it's important that it's 1 application and in the springtime. But that's when we would recommend anyway to use Overtake in the spring, because as I mentioned before, as competition increases, we want the competition from the weeds not to be affecting the health of the turf. So it's definitely best to treat in the spring. And then you will be boosting your turf spring recovery rather than the weeds growing within your turf. And then as you get into summer, I know that you guys have really, really long days in the summer, in some places 24-hour play. So it's really important you have that resilience so that your turf can survive the summer heat and the summer lack of rain possibly, and the summer wear tolerance from all of that play. So really important to get ahead of your weeds and get a head start to make your turf as healthy as it can possibly be. So the 3 key benefits of using Overtake. So it's broad spectrum, which I have a couple of slides a bit later on that will show you the weeds that we actually can control using Overtake. The active ingredients allow it to be broad spectrum. It is safe to use at low water volumes. So coming back to the water volume slide that I showed earlier, we actually recommend that for Overtake, you do go at a 200 litres per hectare water volume. And Marcelo will go through the trials that we did to show that it's actually safe to use at that low water volume. And it is safe for turf. We've done phytotoxicity trials. So we can say that it's safe for your turf, it won't affect your turf, and it will be reliable. So that dual action, again, will mean that you'll get reliable results. So why are weeds susceptible and turf isn't susceptible? So we get a lot of questions around, I'm worried about the safety of my turf. Why? So we thought we would look into why weeds are susceptible, but it will be absolutely safe to use on your turf. And it is to do with the active ingredients, the way they work. So the auxin growth hormone and the amino acids inhibitor. it's the different way that broadleaf weeds process these active ingredients, which I'll describe more in the next slide, means that broadleaf weeds are just a little bit more susceptible than the turf is. And I think what's important on this slide is to highlight that young broadleaf weed tissue is a little bit more sensitive to flu, and disrupting protein and amino acid synthesis in young plants this is the most important growth stage for them, so it will affect them, and it will work best at that stage. And the first symptoms for flu are likely to be visible after 1 or 2 days, so it's not a matter of hours, but you will hopefully see some curling of leaves and stems after 1 or 2 days. The activity of fluazolam might not be for 1 or 2 weeks after application, which is pretty normal for a herbicide application. It's compared to other herbicides, it's quite normal, but I think I was expecting to see something immediately. But actually after 1 or 2 days, you will see some curling of stems. So some more detail around why we can say that your turf will be safe. So it's to do with the weed morphology of broadleaf weeds, that there's just more surface area on broadleaf weeds than turf. If you think about the actual shape of the leaves on broadleaf weeds, there's just more surface area for it to be, the active to be absorbed into the leaf and into the plant, rather than thinking of a turf leaf that's really got quite small surface area in relation to the weeds. So actually the uptake will be more in broadleaf weeds. And broadleaf weeds metabolize overtake slowly and inefficiently, whereas in grasses, overtake is metabolized relatively quickly. And so the effects of it are much lower. It kind of gets out of its system much more quickly, much more effectively. And so it has, the effects are, you can't see the effects on turf. There was a study that was done, and in comparison, comparing white clover uptake with grasses uptake. And so for flow, tall fescues against clover in a greenhouse, the time taken to reach 50% foliar uptake of flow was much shorter in clover, 23 hours, relative to tall fescue, which was 72 hours. And it just means that the selectivity for flow for white clover, which I know can be an issue for you guys, it just affects the clover much, much more, because the levels of absorption and the levels of metabolism, you can see a much higher level of metabolism in turf, so that there's much less effect. A little bit more on the overtake formulation, providing you a robust solution. So the dual mode of action also can help reduce the risk of weed resistance. So if you have any sort of resistance in your weeds to herbicides, then the dual mode of action can help reduce the risk of this becoming worse. And the broad spectrum, combining the actives, does give the formulation broad spectrum. And the balance between the actives, as I've mentioned, allows it to work in a range of temperatures. So when you get fluctuating day and night temperatures, and also when you even get fluctuating, day-to-day temperatures, it allows overtake to still be effective. And the novel formulation that I mentioned before maximizes performance. So the formulation is really, really important, and something that we look into with all of our products to make sure that you are getting the best efficacy from the product that is possible. So quickly on the mode of action. So the uptake of Overtake and movement is in the crown and the xylem. And Overtake is mainly absorbed through the leaves. As I mentioned before, this is why broadleaf weeds are more susceptible, because there's more surface area to take in Overtake through the leaves. And it isn't root active. So what this means is that it's really important when you're thinking about application, not only to be thinking about the rate and the water volume, but be thinking about the nozzles that you're using and making sure that you're using the correct nozzles to get the Overtake to where it needs to be. So you don't want to be drowning the plant and for the product to be slipping off into the soil. Just need to be careful and be sure that you are hitting the leaves and the crown of the weeds to make sure you get maximum efficacy. And I know that Lars has done a lot of work on art of application, and I'm sure that Tom Robinson's application webinar is available to watch for any sort of tips and advice, and we're always here to help with application, because it's so important for us that the product gets to where it needs to be, rather than if it's not where it wants to be, then we're not doing our job correctly. Okay, and here is the label for Sweden. So obviously it doesn't cover all areas of the label, but these are the most important points. So the use areas: sports fields, golf, race courses and airfields. And the formulation I've mentioned a few times, SE, suspension emulsion concentrate. I think the interesting thing is the water volume claim on the label, which is 120 to 400 litres a hectare. Now 120 is very low, and in our trials we wanted to test efficacy and safety at 120 litres a hectare, and Marcella will go through the water volume trials a little bit later, but just to highlight really that even at double rate, so we tested at the label rate and at double rate, we found that Overtake was safe to the turf. We didn't see any phytotoxicity, and actually there was less efficacy at 400 litres a hectare than there was at 200 litres a hectare. But just to highlight, it's interesting that you could go down to 120 litres if you wanted to, if you needed to. One spring application only, and the pack size is 5 litres. So here is, this isn't an exhaustive list. We do have an exhaustive list, but I tried to pick out the weeds that are most important. So these are highly susceptible. We did a lot of work on efficacy of the weeds, and here's a list of the highly susceptible. So got daisy there, white clover, dandelion, some common chickweed. These are all highly susceptible to Overtake. And then we have susceptible weeds as well. So in here, ribwort plantain was susceptible. And then we do have moderate susceptibility of greater plantain, which I know is also a common weed and an issue for you guys. So there is some moderate susceptibility for the greater plantain, but quite good control of ribwort plantain, as well as shepherd's purse and yarrow and knotgrass. And then when we were thinking about how else we could sort of really help you guys in thinking about a more programmed approach to weed control. So we realized that Overtake is only one application a year. So what actually else could we possibly recommend for you to help with weed control? And actually, weeds can tell you a lot about your underlying soil conditions, so things that you can't see. And weeds can tell you a lot about the growing conditions that your turf is in. So is there any way that you could counter these conditions to favour the growth of healthy turf rather than the ingress of weeds, by making it more inhospitable for weeds and more hospitable to turf, and adopting practices over time? So it's not a quick fix, but adopting practices over time that might improve any soil structure or compaction or anything like that. Areas of your course that are highly have high traffic might see some issues. So just thinking a little bit about how you could go about those challenges, really. So I put together, there's a lot of information in the next slide, but I put together a list, and I put four of the most common and top weeds in the top there and highlighted them. But just to give you an idea of what sort of conditions we're talking about, and you can see there that actually relieving compaction, for example, if you've got any areas of high wear that might be compacted, actually relieving compaction could have an effect on a whole list of weeds. So the same with if you have any drainage issues anywhere. So is there any way that you could help with drainage or irrigation to alleviate that problem? And you can probably alleviate quite a lot of factors that make these weeds grow. And then what I was planning to do was to put this into possibly an online tool to help you guys. So actually you could, some sort of tool for your toolbox. So if you, for example, had a plantain problem, so compaction is a big factor in plantain ingress. So then what could you do about that? Clover might indicate any nitrogen or fertility issues. So is there anything that you could do about that? And so what I want to do is start identifying these cultural practices to make it more inhospitable to weeds, and put this in a tool, an online resource for you, for your toolbox. And I'd be really interested when we have questions and answers at the end, a discussion, if this would be interesting for you, and if it's something that we could then develop into more of an interactive tool for you. So finally, before I hand over to Marcella, as well as thinking about new tools that we could create to try and solve problems for you, or make our products easier for you to use, we do have a lot of existing tools. So I know Lars in the past has talked about his toolbox, and it does include our online support. So we have Greencast and the Greencast Turf app. Now Greencast has many tools on there which can really help with your everyday information. So it has weather, disease prediction, support application support tools, an area for art of application. There's a wealth of knowledge and experience really on Greencast, and I really would encourage you all to go on and check out the tools, because they can really help you in managing different conditions on the golf course. And then with the Greencast Turf app, we are launching an update to the Turf app, hopefully by March this year, hopefully in the first quarter of the year. And what that will offer you, in addition to what it offers already, which is support with calculations, so spray calculations. We've had feedback that actually spray calculations can be quite difficult and sort of maybe a bit irritating to do, and actually we wanted to help and solve that issue for you. So the tool at the moment helps with spray calculations, makes them easy, helps you optimize every spray application. It includes tank mixes, how much active ingredient to water you need in a particular tank mix, for example. So not only will we have that, but the update will also, within the same app, have an online disease guide, pest and disease alerts, and it will have links through to products via pests and disease. So we really hope to be able to make it, to link up all of our existing tools that we have and make it a really, really excellent and interesting and useful tool for you to use. So I just want to say, look out for that. We're always here to support you, and I'd be very interested in some feedback on the what our weeds can tell us about soil conditions idea to make that online. So with that, I will hand over to Marcella, who will go through some of the trials research.
Hello, can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I don't know how many minutes left I have, so I will ask our boss, Lars, how I'm doing with time.
Just take the time you need, okay? You'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. I have permission then.
Yeah.
Good. So because we have also some questions in the chat, but I think I'm gonna leave them to the end, and then I can share it with the rest of the people in the call. So as Caroline mentioned before, sorry, this went too fast. I'm going to talk a little bit about trials data results, but I will focus on three major points that Caroline already mentioned about this product. The first one will be a little bit about the spectrum of control of the weeds. We have a lot of data. We focus on major weeds for doing the trials. So of course, I cannot answer all your questions maybe right now, but please feel free to contact us if you have any specific weed that we didn't mention today. But in general, I will show you some of the work we did in that respect. Then we are going to look at some data on water volumes, specifically on low water volumes. That's the interesting part. And then I will give you some more extra confidence of how safe this product is for turf and how reliable in terms of results. So this is one slide that can look very simple, but indeed was a lot of work, because here we are looking at the efficacy of the product of Overtake during two different seasons, during spring and during autumn. But this is the mean of around 20 trials done in Europe. So here we have 13. That's the data that I had at that time to analyze, but we have more data coming. So a lot of work in one trial, in one graph. And you can see here the percentage of weed control in the y-axis, and then the different major species that we test, the bellies, the plantago. In the plantago, we are combining here the major and the reedbore plantain, Taraxacum and Trifolium, that is the clover. So what it's very interesting here is that we look at the efficacy during the spring and the autumn, and we saw some significant differences on the performance of the herbicide depending when do you apply it. So this is an excellent learning, but also reinforce why you have an application in the spring. So you can be confident that we did the trial work. It's important to do the applications when the weeds are actively growing, because we need that growth. We need the plant to be able to metabolize the product. And hopefully, if the weeds are not so big, so try to go when not when they just germinate, because you want them all to germinate and have a little bit of biomass to uptake product. But normally when the weeds are smaller, the control should be better. So we are talking here about efficacies of 80%, close to 90% for the three major weeds. The plantago is a very challenging species to control. We got some good control on reedbore plantain. I got one of the questions in the chat about the major. Plantago major is more difficult, so we are looking right now at ways of improving this. And also it's important what Caroline mentioned, that we need to look at other cultural practices to help us controlling weeds that are so difficult, like the plantago. So we have the data in different countries under different weather conditions. So this is just a summary. The next graph, it's about water volumes. So how effective is the product at lower water volumes? This is some information that if you look in the internet and you try to find trials results in water volumes are lower than 400, it's very, very few. But this data, it's a mean of 21 trials that we did in Europe, where we were testing the efficacy of the product at 125 liters per hectare, 250, 200 as well, and 500. And we saw some differences. That was really interesting. We have a label that allows us to go as low as 120. So we wanted to be sure that, first of all, it was safe, but also that the product was doing its job. So we saw some differences in the efficacy. So that's why we are really recommending to go at 200 if that's what you can do. But if you don't have the time and if you want to go lower in the water volume, you still can have a good efficacy, not as good as if you go at 200, but you can have, you can see the data, you know what to expect. Before we didn't know too much about it. So I think this is very interesting data, very practical for you guys to make your own decision. We're here just to give you the information and to recommend you that if you want the best out of the product, then 200 is showing the more consistent and best efficacy in the weed control. We will go to the next one, that is the turf safety, very important. And personally, I'm always very careful with herbicide recommendations. So I wanted to be 1,000,000% sure that this is safe under different conditions and different turf cultivars. So we run safety screening trials. That's how we technically call these trials. And in the trials area, you have different species, different cultivars, and then you spray them with the different treatments. Normally, we do it at the label rate. Your label rate is 1.8. In other countries, it will be 2. So in this case, we tested at 2 liters per hectare, but also we did it at 4 liters per hectare. So we doubled the rate. So actually, what I want to do here is to create a phytotoxicity. That's my objective, but I couldn't achieve it here. So I am sure that even if you double the rate, you will not see any phytotoxicity in the turf. We tested in 19 cool season grass cultivars, so very representative. We did this work in STRI here in England, and we check mainly ryegrasses, fescues, annual meadow grass, of course, bent grass, and Boa pratensis. So very representative, and we never saw any problem, and I was really trying to push for it. We also did the applications on a hot environment, well, for England. We did applications when we had 25 degrees Celsius, so trying to push also to get that phyto, and we didn't see any problem. So that gives me the confidence to tell you guys you can do it, and you will not see any problem with your turf. This is a user trial example. So I think it's important because this is real life. So all the other things I told you before are in more controlled conditions. So with research stations, some of the trials we do it in golf courses, but again, we control some of the variables. But in this one, it's a user trial, so it's the real thing. We did this trial last year. We were able to do it even with the lockdown trial. So I was really happy that it was possible. And we did it in England in a golf course located in Saffron Walden. This is close to our office here in Fulbourn, Cambridge. The trial was done in a driving range, and the grass that we have was predominantly ryegrass, but we have some other species present. It was not 100% ryegrass. We have big plot size, 7 by 20 meters. because we wanted to focus this trial, and our objectives was to look also at the water volume. So the three things that I mentioned before, the water volume, the efficacy of the product, and the safety, were our major objectives. So in this case, we hire a contractor to do the different applications, and we did it with Overtake with the normal rate and then the double the rate as well, because we wanted to push the conditions to see if there was any implication in the turf health, and we didn't find it. So we did 120, 200, and 400 liters of spray water volumes, and we use the industry standard conditions for application, and we assess the percentage of control of the weed, and we do this comparing the amount of weeds present in a plot against the untreated area. So it's a comparison we are not counting weeds here. We want to know how much it's controlled compared with the area that we didn't treat. It's the same kind of methodology we use for the other trials that I present you before. So the treatment list, you can see it in that table, different water volumes, different rates, and also you have there the description of the nozzles that we use. We use XC nozzles from Syngenta, and the speed and the pressure bar that they achieve with the equipment that they use to spray. The two pictures that you can see in the right side of your screen is the first one is the trial site on the day that we were spraying. So we have very good conditions for spraying, 18, 20 degrees Celsius and very low wind speed. And the picture below is interesting because what we wanted to see was how the product was sprayed in the turf. And for that, we're using a water sensitive paper that we put them in those wood sticks. So when you go with your sprayer, you're basically spraying that area, but you're spraying also these papers. So the color, the purple color, is showing you where the droplets and where the product is targeting, where it's hitting, and the yellow part is the original color of the paper. So the first and more yellow paper is the one that was sprayed at 120. So you can see less purple dots, meaning that it received not probably the best amount of product. And then the following one is the one at 200 liters. So it's a more even coverage and droplets. And then the last one is the one at 400 liters. And it's a little bit more floated, meaning that could be maybe the reason why the efficacy at 400 is not as good as 200. It could be that the product is moving from the leaf surface and is floating. So that's a practical exercise that you can maybe do. The water sensitive papers is something that it might be easy to get, and you can look at your spraying conditions as well. So in terms of results, we made assessments every 5, 13, and 34 days after the first application. As I mentioned to you before, no phytotoxicity was observed at any day, not when we apply and not later, at any water volume. So that's confirming all the research trials that we were doing before. The optimal performance, again, very consistent at 200 liters. No real extra benefits were seen at 400 liters. We got more than 80% control after 34 days after the first application at 200 liters. And in this case, the control was very good in dandelions and in reedwort plantain. Before we said in the summary table, we mentioned that the reedwort plantain was susceptible, not highly susceptible, because we're looking at the mean of maybe 20, 40, 60 trials. But it could be that in your real conditions, you can get a better control. So in this case, we got 80%. So I mean, it's to manage expectations, the main table about the susceptibility of all the weeds, but in your actual conditions, it could be a little bit more or maybe a little bit less depending on, the environmental conditions and your management. So in this case, it was very good for the reedboard plantain. And the highest weed control, it was seen at the last assessment. So that confirms also what Caroline was saying and understanding our mode of action, that is not a product like glyphosate that you will see an effect almost right away. You need to be a little bit patient depending on the weeds, because both of the active ingredients act differently. So you need some time to look at the major results. So you can see in the pictures, the first picture is the plots treated on 120 liters water volume. So you can see the dandelion color, that it was a scorch. So the product was already inside of the plant acting. Then you can see the following picture is the trial site 34 days after the application. And in the upper picture is the plot at 400 liters and the doubled rate. And you can see that there is no damage or any visual phytotoxicity on the turf. So double rate and 400 liters, again, we were not able to do any damage whatsoever. So that's me. Just to wrap up about the best practices for applying this product. Oh, sorry. Before I finish about the trial part, I didn't include in this presentation because, as Lars mentioned and Caroline, you're the first country we're launching this product. So there is still a lot of work ongoing, and I have more work now in the field. And also, I am getting more results from previous trials. And I was looking at integration of products as well. So we did trials where we combined the application of Overtake with Primomax. So that's an interesting one. And also we mix it with Rider, our pigment product, and Highcure, our biostimulant. So right now I'm analyzing that data. So I promise you guys that I will go back soon with more news about integration of the product. What I can tell you so far is with the Primomax, we need to be a little bit careful. So I was doing tank mixes. That's something I will never recommend with an herbicide and a Primomax. So I'm going to understand it better. But it's something that shouldn't alter your program of Primomax. So the results I've seen so far are quite promising in terms of how to combine them, because I know you will start your Primo program kind of at the same time as you're planning to do your Overtake. And the results with Rider are very, very positive. We know that our formulation of Rider and the type of pigment we have, it doesn't interfere with the mode of action of this herbicide. There are other pigments in the market, and depends on the type of herbicide and mode of action, they sometimes don't work well together. But I can assure you that Rider and Overtake is not, the efficacy is not jeopardized, but I need to put that data together so I am able to present it to you properly. So that's kind of something that I'm working on and you will have very soon. It's like a trailer before the movie, so giving you some news in advance. And with Highcure, interesting as well, because Caroline was mentioning that one of the active ingredients affects the enzyme production, and that's related with the amino acids and other, protein building blocks. So I can tell you that at least with Highcure, our amino acids biostimulant product, we haven't seen any problem with Overtake application together. So it's not interfering with the efficacy of the product either. So again, I will come back to you with more integration. And just to finish with best practices, we mentioned that apply it in the spring with the weeds are actively growing. Try not to apply it when the turf is under stress, because we need the plant to uptake the product and to do their metabolic processes. 200 liters water volume for spraying shows the best results. in the label, and also as a good practice, try not to mow it 3 days before the application. I know that that could be a tough one, but if you can follow that recommendation, you will improve your efficacy. And also when the leaves are dry. I got a good question in the chat as well about applying it with dew. It should be okay, but the best recommendation is with a dry leaf. In reality, that's difficult to get. And in terms of nozzles, the 0.25 and 0.4 XC nozzles from Syngenta are the ideal ones to use. So I think that's the end of the presentation from my side. Overtake, get ahead, try to apply early, and not give all the food and resources to the weeds and do it to the turf. So thank you for listening to us, and hopefully you can ask all the questions that you want and we can answer them. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you so much to Marcella and Caroline for the great presentation and the great news about the Overtake. I hope all of you have gotten a really good information around the product, how to use, when to use, and all that, which is important. Well, as Marcella said now, we invite you to a Q&As, and I can see there's been coming in some questions around, in the chat. I can also see that Marcella already answered some of them, which is good. Thank you very much, Marcella. But there might be that some of you guys haven't seen the questions yet. So I will put them out here anyway. I think you're on mute, Marcella. So if you ask, but it says
yes,
here.
I wanted to leave it to you, Lars.
Yeah, that's fine. No. Don't leave me out here alone.
We will do it together, all of us.
Yeah, I think I want to invite Caroline and Rod to this Q&A as well. So if the tech team can spotlight those, that there they are. Very good. Thank you very much. And so the first question here is can you use Overtake on greens? Marcella, do you want to take that one or?
Yes. Well, we have the label. The label says that you can go on sports fields, golf courses, race courses, and airfields. So it's allowed. I don't know if Rod wants to add something or Caroline.
No, I agree. It's allowed. Yeah.
So the answer is
Thank you.
yes. Shortly.
Then that question. Yes. Very good. And then I think what's the name of 2 active ingredients? I only know Flu and Flow, so I don't have it in front.
Fluroxypyr and flurazzolam. I think Marcella actually wrote them in the chat for the spelling.
Yeah, you got the spelling. That's probably easier.
Yeah.
Good. And then, as Marcella said, label on sports field, golf courses, race courses, airfields. I think they were more about greens, golf greens was the questions. I think that's fine, Marcella. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What effect to Plantago Major? So that I think you had that in your presentation. So what we have seen was we can see in the trials has been around 60% efficacy. Is that correct? For the spring application?
I would say between 40, probably 40, 50, 30.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an average, but the major is more difficult than the read board. So we are around 40 to 50 probably.
Yeah. And then it's the question of does it have any effect on silverweed?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have information data now that I can look at in silverweed. So not something that I can confirm right now.
Fine, thank you. And then, and the question around spring, that's a good one. Thanks, Marcella. So, how do you define spring? And that's quite interesting one. I think if you go down in Skåne area in Sweden, I think spring already started. And if you go all the way up north in Sweden, the spring could still be in July. So it's it's a difficult one, but the label says spring. So I don't know if you have any other ideas, Rod, of how to define spring, but I really can't define it more than that. it's a bit vague, but I think it's in your advantage, guys. So maybe you can take that opportunity as well. And then it's on best practices apply on dry weeds, as you said. So preferably on dry weeds, but you know how difficult it is, Marcella, as you said. So yeah. What's the minimum temperature for application in spring?
Well, basically the weeds need to be growing, actively growing. So, you know, probably if you're above 10, the weeds are actively growing, but let the growth be your friend. So they need to be moving for it to work well.
Yeah.
Once you see some movement, some growth in the spring, you're probably okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. And then Robert has a question here, Robert Martin. Instead of using spring for determining when you should apply, is it possible to use growing degree days, GDD? If so, what value would be the best for the majority of the weeds? Ooh.
It's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Something we probably need to think about after this call, but I'll just go back probably to my previous answer. You know, with the weeds actively growing, you're going to be okay. So across all the different weed species. So as long as they're growing, you're fine. But it's a good question, and we'll think about that some more.
Yeah. And then price, of course, you will have from your dealer. So please go and quote the price from your dealer, and then you will have the price. Is Overtake effective on creeping thistle? So Cirsium arvens. We haven't seen those in the trial, have we, Marcella? I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think I have it in the trials data because I mean I have a list of. I will tell you right now because I'm looking at my screen.
Yeah, I've been looking at the list as well, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I have a list of 140 weeds that were tested at least, but I couldn't find thistle. So I will ask if I can find some more information about it.
Yep.
But from the list that I have of these 150 weeds, I don't have thistle. So I will do the homework for coming back later on that one.
Thanks, Marcella. It's good. But it will probably definitely it will be tried out this spring, I think, in Sweden anyway. So we will probably have some feedback anyway. But let's see. But good
yeah,
if you can check, Marcella.
And what you say is excellent, Lars, because again, this is the first country we are launching the product, so we are going to build our knowledge based on your experience as well and in other countries. So I'm sure that in a couple of months we will know double that what we know today in terms of your major weeds or the problems that are more local to you. So we will learn together.
Thanks, Marcella. Thank you so much to Caroline, Marcella, for presenting. Well done. For me, it was quite clear as well. So hope it was clear for you as well. But if you have more questions, please go ahead, pop me an email, whatever, and we will of course answer your questions anytime. So go ahead. This is the third one of our webinars. This is the launch of Overtake. Now it is it's available at the distributors. They have the price, they have the products. You just go ahead, order up, make sure you kill that weed and get your turf the best as you can. Then remember our next session in 2 weeks. So same day of the week, so Thursday. It's on Thursday, the 11th of March at the same time. So 1300 again, and it's going to be around spring recovery. That webinar will be held by Marcella again and myself. I will also pop in and join in this time. Hope I can contribute to something for you guys as well. Other than that, I think it's done here from my side. Thank you again for joining the call, joining the webinars. Hope you get something out of it. And again, we will do this in 2 weeks. So tune in then again, and please have a nice day. good Friday next tomorrow, and have a great weekend. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all. Okay, bye bye.